All right, today we're diving deep into some really intense research. It takes us right into the heart of a crisis unfolding in a South African nature reserve. Now, on the surface, this is a story about the war for wildlife, but it's really about the people caught in the crossfire and how unbelievably extreme pressure can literally shatter an organization's moral compass.
So the paper we're looking at kicks off with this quote from a veteran ranger named Sean. "This place is crawling with snakes." Wow. It's just so raw, so visceral. And it tells you right from the jump that this is not going to be a simple story of good guys versus bad guys. It is way, way more complicated than that.
And this slide really gets to the heart of the conflict, doesn't it? On one hand, you have the ideal we all know, the brave ranger, the hero. But the reality the research uncovered on the ground, it's a much darker world, one filled with corruption, where the lines between who's a hero and who is a villain are just completely blurred. Okay, so let's zoom in a bit. We're going to move from this big picture conflict to the actual people living it every single day, because this isn't some abstract problem. The paper shows how this has become a genuine landscape of fear, and it's the rangers themselves who are paying an enormous human cost in this so-called rhino war. So we circle back to Sean, that veteran ranger. I mean, you can just feel the exhaustion in this quote. He's ashamed, feels like he's personally failing. He's completely burned out, disillusioned. He's fighting a battle he feels like he just can't win because the whole system is letting him down. And then you've got this other story, the immense pressure on a junior ranger named Prince. He's being ridiculed by his own community. They mock him for earning peanuts to protect what they called the white man's rhino, while guys he grew up with are involved in poaching and driving brand new cars. He's stuck right in the middle, and he's not trusted by either side. These stories are incredibly powerful. But here's the thing. The researchers argue they're just symptoms of a much bigger problem. This isn't about a few bad apples or a couple of conflicted guys like Sean and Prince. No, the problem is the entire system. We are looking at a full-blown systemic moral collapse. Which brings us to the central question, the one this paper is really trying to unpack. Is this all just about a few weak or corrupt individuals making bad choices? Or is there something much deeper going on, something structural within the organization and the environment it's operating in? And the paper introduces a really critical concept here, moral collapse. So this isn't about one person's mistake. It's when the whole system breaks down. It's that moment when all the social structures that normally support doing the right thing just crumble. And suddenly, unethical behavior becomes the new normal. And this collapse is happening inside what the researchers call an extreme context. Think of it like a pressure cooker. It's an environment where the crises, the threats, are so constant, so relentless, that they completely overwhelm an organization's ability to cope. And the result is devastating consequences for the people inside. So what does this extreme context actually feel like on the ground? Well, it's not abstract at all. It's the constant, real danger from armed poachers. It's the psychological damage from shame and burnout. It's a deep-seated suspicion where rangers don't even trust their own teammates. And you layer on top of that all the economic and social pressures we saw with Prince. This is the fertile ground where our moral compass begins to break. Okay, so here's where it gets really fascinating. The paper argues that this extreme context is basically the fuel for a massive clash, a collision between two completely different moral worlds. And these are the ties that bind people to their beliefs, but they also blind them to any other perspective. This table just lays it out perfectly. On one side, you have the conventional world. This is the professional conservationist view, where protecting wildlife is heroic and poaching is evil. But on the other side, you have the unconventional world of the local community, where poaching might be seen as just a way to feed your family, or even as an act of resistance. The rangers, they are caught right in the middle of this tug of war. And here's a perfect snapshot of that conventional worldview, pulled from a ranger's memoir. It's romantic, almost mythical. The ranger is this pure-hearted hero who can withstand anything. This is the official story, the one we all like to believe. And then you get this, a totally different reality. This quote is from an employee describing the funeral of a poacher, and his community is mourning him as a hero, a provider who is just trying to make a living. When you have two worldviews this opposed, with absolutely no middle ground, well, that's when the system starts to crack. So we've got the conflict. We see the two clashing worlds. But how exactly does this lead to a total organizational breakdown? Let's trace that downward spiral that the researchers identified. So, the researchers actually mapped this out. They created this model of the whole breakdown process. It's like a chain reaction, really, where one failure triggers the next and the next, creating this vicious cycle that just pulls the whole organization under. Let's walk through the key stages together. So, it basically unfolds in 4 stages. First, you've got those clashing ideologies we just talked about. That creates intense moral conflict inside individual rangers, leaving them feeling alienated and cynical. Then, that individual struggle scales up and paralyzes the entire organization in what the paper calls moral gridlock. And from there, it is a very short, slippery slope to the final stage, total moral collapse, where doing the wrong thing just becomes the way things are done. And this is the real kicker. It's not a one-way street. It is a feedback loop. The moral collapse actually makes the extreme context even more extreme. The violence gets worse, the distrust gets deeper, the fear gets more intense, and all of that just pours more fuel on the fire, starting the cycle all over again. Okay, so after painting such a bleak picture, the obvious question is, can this be fixed? Is there any way to break this vicious cycle? Can you actually escape this kind of moral gridlock? Let's see what the research suggests. We have to ask, when the pressure gets this high, is this downward spiral just inevitable? Or is it possible for an organization to actively fight back and build up its resilience against this kind of collapse?
And the good news is, according to this research, the answer is yes. There is another way. This second model from the paper shows it clearly. That top path? That's the vicious cycle of collapse we just walked through. But notice the bottom path. That shows a different set of steps, a proactive process for building moral resilience and pulling an organization back from the brink.
The number one intervention they propose is something called deep dialogue. And what's so fascinating is how they define it. This isn't about getting everyone in a room to agree. It's kind of the opposite. It's about creating a safe enough space where all the tension and disagreement can finally come to the surface, but with mutual respect. It's about understanding, not agreeing. Only then can you start to tackle the real problems.
And that really brings us to the final big picture question. The story of this one South African reserve is an incredible case study, but its lessons are universal. In a world that seems to be facing more and more extreme pressures, what does it really take to build moral resilience? Not just in a nature reserve, but in any organization, in any community. What does it take to maintain our integrity when it matters most?